Good. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Keith Nitka. I'm the Battleship Operations Manager here on board Battleship Wisconsin, and I want to thank you for joining me today on another Whiskey Wednesday virtual adventure. As you know, you guys have been watching, I like to involve former crew members on board the ship, and today I have the pleasure to be with Mr. Guy Zanti. Mr. Zanti was a lieutenant on board Battleship Wisconsin, and he worked here in Combat Engagement Center. Again, specific to the battleships in general, and you might have seen a previous Whiskey Wednesday about CEC. But I got Mr. Zanti here. I'm going to ask him some questions, and we're going to get the skinny on what exactly goes on in here. Okay. So, Guy, thanks very much for being with me today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you were on board Battleship Wisconsin, the last commissioning, shipmate of mine.
Yes.
And what was your job or position on board Battleship Wisconsin?
My title was Missiles Officer, and as Missiles Officer, I owned the new technology weapons. The old technology being the 16-inch guns and the 5-inch guns. The new technology was the Harpoon cruise missile, so surface-to-surface ship, sea skimming attack cruise missile. The Tomahawk missile, which had a land attack version and an at-sea anti-ship version, and the close-in weapon systems, the CWIS, the little R2-D2 robot-like close-in weapon systems. That was our air defense around the ship. So that was Missiles Officer. My watch station was Tactical Action Officer.
Okay.
Right here.
Right here. So you were the Tactical Action Officer of the TAO in CEC.
Yes, sir.
So can you elaborate some on what exactly the TAO on board Battleship Wisconsin is responsible for or does here?
Sure. The TAO's job is to defend the ship and to fight the ship. Now, most of the offensive weapons on this platform you have to have release from higher authority. The Tomahawks come via an emergency exit message with your engagement, your missions. We can't generate those from here, and we can't authorize launch release. The Harpoons, we can release those as well as defend our ship with the CWIS and the 5-inch gun. Any of the targets ashore come to us from other places, but the job of the TAO is to manage the communications, make sure the ship's in position to defend itself, and to get to where it has to be in accordance with the combat action type missions.
Okay, so let's say that there is an inbound aircraft at us. We're not sure whose exactly it is. Maybe it's got lock on, maybe it's fired a missile at us. Do you have authority sitting in this chair to protect the ship without speaking to the captain first?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
However, I don't have much weapon systems to do that. When this ship was built, anti-air warfare wasn't a big component. This ship was built to attack other battleships and to attack land targets. So if there's an aircraft shooting at us, we could throw up some 5-inch rounds to try and maybe get lucky and hit it, but we don't have radars that can guide those bullets to an inbound missile. That's where the close-in weapon system comes in. And there was one particular instance where we had an inbound aircraft, and our first engagement is by radio. Unknown aircraft at bearing and range from this vessel. This is United States Navy warship. You are entering, and we would go through a script on to de-escalate. Maybe it's a bad guy, maybe it isn't. And this, what we thought was a bad guy, kept closing, and we literally thought we got shot at, and so we braced for shock.
I remember
and
that
I remember jumping down on the deck right behind my commanding officer. We were doing the same thing at the same time. False alarm. Didn't happen. There was also one time when we thought there was a cruise missile being shot at us. And I remember it may have been the consoles over there. The operations specialist manning that console kind of flipped out a little bit. I told him, calm down. You're in the best place in the world to be if you're going to be shot at by a cruise missile. And you're safe. Don't worry.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you have the authority to take those actions.
Okay.
That's your responsibility.
So how many TAOs were there on the ship that you rotated through for watch?
Like 5 or 6. There may have been that many qualified. We didn't all. I don't recall how many section rotation. It may have been 6. 4 hours, 6 hours, just depending on what was going on. The weapons officer, the operations officer, they were both commanders. Myself, the CIC officer was qualified, the first lieutenant was qualified, and maybe 1 or 2 others.
Okay.
But I'd served in 2 other warships as the tactical action officer, but had a lot more offensive firepower, air, surface-to-air type defense. That was a lot different.
Okay.
But here you're managing communications, you're managing navigation, and whatever the captain wants.
Qualifying. So it's my understanding, could be completely wrong, which is where you step in and help me out here. When Captain Blesh was relieved by Captain Bill in the Persian Gulf, did you in essence have to requalify as TAO for Captain Bill, or it was just kind of a, you were the TAO before, you're still a TAO now sort of thing?
Part of the turnover is the new CO happy with everything that he inherited from the former CO. And generally the qualifications remain intact, but the captain would have to re-sign all the orders saying, Lieutenant Zanti is hereby qualified to be a tactical action officer in accordance with all this, and then sign it.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of paperwork for that type of turnover. I didn't have to requalify. You have to be a surface warfare officer. You have to go through the TAO PQS. And I, in fact, wrote a 100-question TAO exam that we adopted that we would use for both training and qualifications for the tactical action officers.
Now, part of the tour, of course, is talking about the nuclear weapons that we may or may not have had on board the ship. I know you have first-hand knowledge of that, being the missile officers. Could you talk a little bit about the TLAM-Ns that we had and what we did with them?
Sure. Early August of 1990, the Iraqis invaded Kuwait. President Bush famously stood before the cameras and said, "This will not stand," and that essentially spun up Desert Shield. And the orders leading up to that were following that were fast and furious. We were supposed to deploy to the Mediterranean in later August anyway, with the Theodore Roosevelt Battle Group. So you can imagine a CVN and a BB in the Mediterranean at the same time with all the escorts. What a powerful battle group that would have been. But the order was made to send Wisconsin right now. Actually, I think we deployed the same day we would have anyway.
Yeah.
But we just beelined it all the way to the Persian Gulf. The order from President Bush was no nuclear weapons in theater. Oops, we have 2 of them. So we had to go through the process of getting in the right pier space across the pier from the ship that we cross-decked the weapons to.
Okay.
So whenever you're dealing with nuclear weapons, you got the Personal Reliability Program, the PRP, and everyone anywhere close to that weapon in security and safety and in the management of it has to be cleared through the PRP. And so we cross-decked 2 of those missiles. We were on one side of the pier, USS Virginia was on the other side, and we used cranes to slide the weapon out of the tube, crane it over onto the pier. As soon as that happened, that pier becomes an exclusion zone, and the use of deadly force is authorized in the exclusion zone. And little old Lieutenant Zanti, with his 45 on his hip, I was the sole person in the exclusion zone. What a sight. Me and a nuke and my 45. And then that missile got cross-decked onto the Virginia, and then the second one happened, and we cross-decked it. And so now we're nuclear weapons free, we're clear to go.
Okay. Something else rather famous that we talk about on the tour is the Iraqi surrendering to our drone. And I know that you are the man when you were on watch. So tell us about that.
So I'm eyewitness. I'm sitting in this chair, and we had a screen over there that was our display, and we could dial in whatever we wanted to see. Typically, the most interesting things to see is what the RPV was looking at, the remote piloted vehicle. The RPV is our eye in the sky. It's used for spotting for the 16-inch guns. Why? Because these guns shoot so far, it's beyond our organic sensors to see the fall of shot, make the corrections, and put rounds on target. So we have a drone. It could fly out about 100 miles one way and come back. Typically, it didn't go that far, 20, 30, 50 miles, and hover on station and give us eyes on the ground. That RPV gave us a whole lot more than the call of shot and the call for fire images. We got to see the tanks rolling out of Baghdad, coming down here for the mother of all tank battles. That was how it was being described. And it's an infrared camera, and those tanks are burning hot. And it looked like a daylight image at nighttime, and all these tanks were coming down to engage General Schwarzkopf and his tanks. Well, hostilities ceased. And my recollection was it was kind of chill here in CIC, and the RP's up flying around watching the activities of the post-hostilities. And Failaka Island caught our attention. Failaka is a small island off the coast of Kuwait Harbor. And the RPV's flying around, and we see this guy walking. He looks up, evidently sees the RPV over top of him, and he pulls out this big white sheet and starts waving it. And I said, "Hey, I'm the senior guy on watch. That's my prisoner of war. He's mine. I have a real life POW from Iraq." We got a chuckle out of it, but that's where they, I guess, one of the in-processing locations for what to do with all the prisoners that are in Kuwait.
Okay. All right. So they were already there waiting to get scooped up, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He took his, he found his 15 seconds of fame on the camera.
He did. He
essence.
looked up and started making it. We got real excited.
Tell us about the Roach Coach is making its approach.
Another thing the RPV picked up was, it's a lot of desert out there. And when you see a lone vehicle tracking south in the desert, you go, I wonder what that vehicle's doing. So we kept an eye on it. He or she didn't know we were watching it, and then it stopped. And we go, okay, we're going to find out here real soon. And then people began to emerge from the sand. Obviously, there were bunkers, hideouts. My guess is that they were outposts for intelligence reporting. Here comes the coalition forces at this location. And we believe what was happening is they came out to get resupplied, food, medical supplies, maybe equipment repair. The old timers in the Navy, I don't know if they do this anymore, say when similar to a canteen truck riding up the pier to serve food to the sailors. The Roach Coach is making its approach.
Yep.
And that's how we likened it. We thought, this guy's coming down to feed the crew. So the decision was made not to engage that truck, because we could have taken out the truck and the 4 or 5 people that were around it. Through discussions with higher authority, we withheld any engagement until we followed that vehicle back to where it emanated. Because the thinking was, where it's coming from is a logistics base. And wouldn't that be a better target? And we were not part of that engagement, to my recollection, but my understanding is that's what happened.
First night of the air war. Battleship Wisconsin is
Yes.
the strike commander. Am I getting that right?
Strike Warfare Commander.
Okay.
Because at the time, in a battle group scenario, they'll assign commanding officers certain warfare duty tasks. The guy on the aircraft carries the Air Warfare Commander. The guy on the cruiser supports that role as Air Warfare Commander as well, because he's a senior 06. Well, the 06 is on the battleship, went one notch above the senior 06s on the cruisers. Those guys are in their major command. The battleship commanding officers are in their sequential command. So we had 2 warfare areas that were divided up between the two battleships. My skipper got Strike, which was the cruise missiles. The other battleship skipper got naval gunfire.
Okay.
So that skipper on the Missouri was in charge of naval gunfire support. We supported that.
Mm-hmm.
We were in charge of strike warfare, and they supported us in that. As such, we were given the duties of the Launch Area Coordinator, the LAC. Now, LAC was a concept up until Desert Storm. Then it became, hey, we're really doing this. And what the LAC does is, in the event that there are multiple Tomahawk shooters, on the night of the 17th of January, there were 10 of us.
Mm-hmm.
So the LAC took tactical control of all the ships and put them in formation. So this has never been done before. How do you launch 47 missiles in a tight time frame? Well, we came up with a revolutionary idea called Big Sky, Little Missile.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not going to run into each other. And that is no kidding. We spaced, I think we were 500 yards apart, 10 ships wide, and we figured whatever ship had a mission that they would launch it, and we would deconflict in that little bit of space as well as the individual time. So around the 1800 hour, we get our orders.
Yep.
This is, we're going to war on the midwatch.
Mm-hmm.
Put the crew to bed, woke them up at midnight. However, my fire controlmen take those missions over there to the track control group. There's 4 consoles in the Tomahawk launch system. 2 of the consoles load the missions. That's track control. 2 of the consoles launch the missions. So track control console, you're typing in all the pre-planned waypoints. And the first pre-planned waypoint, which is the last point over water before it goes over land. So we guide it to that water departure point, if you will, and then the onboard navigation on those missiles take over and guide it to all the waypoints with the speed, the altitude, and the geographic location. And typically it hugs the ground, so it's difficult to detect. And then there's different maneuvers that the weapon can make for the final engagement of the target. Some fly straight in parallel, some will tip up and launch and do a different maneuver depending on the type of target. Some have a higher altitude and it can dispense packets to scatter bomblets on the ground like a runway. So at that hour, the fire controlmen, at the 1800 hour, the night before, the fire controlmen were typing in all of their launch control information and all the mission data. And those computers had that data from around 1900 to about 1200, midnight. Well, when the time came to shoot, you transfer control of the mission over to the launch controllers. And when we did that, we got an indication that we had 0 missiles. So as the missiles officer, had a more junior lieutenant working for me, and he had a senior chief fire controlman, and we had very experienced fire controlmen. And they're scratching their head to go, we don't know what's wrong. So we went through some troubleshooting procedures. I had to inform the captain, who was sitting in this chair, and I was standing right here, and I said, sir, we can't make our launch window. He said, why? He said, because our missile inventory is 0. He said, fix it. I said, what do you need? I said, I think we need a 1-hour extension on our launch window. So the guy sitting there goes up to higher authority. I think it was Tom Mangold.
Okay.
Tom was the CIC officer. Had to make the call, and they called up to get from, I think it was 12:30 to 1:30. We got the permission to do it because who we were talking to knew about the targets we were hitting and was a delayed launch window going to impact whatever else was going on. Essentially, we had the cruise missiles going in low and the aircraft going in high. So we deconflicted space. There was probably some multiple engagements, but the cruise missiles went in to engage things that could harm the aircraft. Surface-to-air missiles, radars, communications. We hit the Bath Party headquarters with the number 6 missile.
All right.
That occurred on the first launch. So we were given permission, and I asked my crew, what are we going to do? They said, we're going to scrub the missions and start over. We think we just crashed the computer. So they went back in, typed, and in those days it was fat finger and all the information. And it's just numbers and letters. So mistakes could be made. So there's a lot of redundancy and a lot of double checking to download all those missiles and then transfer it over. We got the green light to go, and there's a button on the console that says execute. So there's a countdown on the display. You lift the little plastic cover and push it, and it's a pregnant pause. So it's not like you pull the trigger and you hear a bang. You push the button and there's nothing until you hear the bang, and that's the booster igniting and flying through the. We go, oh my god! And then from there on out, everything worked great. So in my recollection, Wisconsin was supposed to be the first cruise missile launched in anger that went to the Paul F. Foster.
Paul F. Foster, the USS Paul F. Foster.
That's my belief, and I was the senior guy on the LAC team. I had a master chief who was brilliant at what he did with all the missions and the planning and all that stuff, and we collectively, and that came from the bridge. Like, oh, there's the first one. Which was that? That was Paul F. Foster. Okay, they got it. We didn't.
Yeah.
So that's what happened that night.
So, how many sailors would be on watch typically here in strike?
Okay, I'll just sort of go around the room. You have the Tomahawk launch controls just for normal condition 3 steaming, I think it was.
Yep.
Not general quarters, but you'd have 1 or 2 Tomahawkers over there. We had a guy at the Slick 32, which is our electronic warfare system, and you have someone manning the close-in weapons system, which is our little enclosed short defense weapons system. Basically, it fires 3,000 rounds a minute at incoming cruise missiles. A plot here, if there was something going on that required plotting naval gunfire, so 7, 8, we'd have 2 or 3 phone talkers here, or radio telephone operators, that they're basically listening, and that's primarily what I'm listening to is higher authority. So that'd be a couple of 3 folks there. The nav team, there'd be 2 or 3 folks doing a duplicate navigation plot, a redundant navigation plot to what you guys were doing in the pilot house. And I'm not sure what that console was over there. So maybe 15, 20 people.
Okay. On just a standard watch.
Just standard watch.
15, 20 people.
And there's chatter amongst the people, and there's the radio crackling. We have internal growler phones here that you can't hear. That's not on the speaker, but you hear it on the headset.
And then the last question I have for you, Guy, is a lot of guests ask, what do you hear when you're in here in strike? So when we fire the guns, when you fire the missiles, what exactly do you hear? Do you feel it? Can you hear it?
You hear the bang of the Tomahawk, and that's the booster ignition that launches the missile through the cover. There's a membrane across the top of the cover. You hear that missile bang, it blows through the cover, and then when the Tomahawk launches, it's not very impressive. You see a surface-to-air missile, and you see a Tomahawk comes out, and it sags a little bit until the onboard engine kicks in, and it takes off. And then there's a booster that drops. In fact, that's another big part of the LAC duties, the launch area coordinator. That rather heavy booster falls into the ocean about a half a mile from the ship. So you have to plot every missile launch location and where you think the booster is going to fall so you don't put a ship in harm's way. But yeah, you can hear the bang of that booster igniting, and then when the guns fire, you can definitely hear it, definitely feel it.
Yeah.
You get a salvo from turret 1, turret 2, turret 3, back to turret 1, turret 2, turret 3, and yeah, you can feel it and you can hear it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it really is. But I know from being up in the pilot house, the guns, the missiles, I hear all of that. The alarm as the ABL is opening up.
Yes, it's like a klaxon bell.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And then you see the launcher raise, and then I think there's a voice command out on the weather decks that you can hear.
Well, there's the boatsmate of the watch who's giving instruction out on deck that you don't want to be in this area, you don't want to be in that area. But I like to think that the guys were smart enough to know when they hear that klaxon going off on the ABLs, and when they know that when we're at gunfire, when we're at NGFS, that they're smart enough to not be out there.
Well, one of the famous pictures that made all the magazines and the newspaper was one of the nighttime launches with a large part of the crew on the forecastle.
Yeah.
And people are like, "You're supposed to be at general quarters. Why is half your crew on the?" And they wanted to see it.
Yeah, that's right. That first night of the war, I didn't know that we were in that kind of formation. I wish I could have seen that, because my GQ station is the 08 level pilot house, and I'm in the chart room that's off of the pilot house back there. So I had no windows. I had
you didn't have
no
eyes out there.
Nope, I couldn't see anything going on. I would have liked to have seen that.
10 ships, line abreast, 500 yards.
That must have been quite a sight to see. I really wish I could have seen that.
Yeah, I couldn't see it either. I was here. It all worked out okay.
Yep, and here we are.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, guys.
My pleasure. Happy to do it.
Thank you. So, thank you very much for joining me today on this Whiskey Wednesday virtual adventure. Commander Guy Zanti, Keith Nitka, and I hope that that y'all can visit us real soon here on board Battleship Wisconsin. Take the tour, see Strike Engagement Center here, learn about the things that that Guy and other sailors in here did. Come and see the pilot house, learn about what it is that sailors like myself and other sailors, my shipmates, all did up there in the pilot house on board Battleship Wisconsin during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again.